Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. Today is June 20th. This is the weekend report. And with us today, we have a bit of a full room, and we'll have a guest a little later on, starting with our crew here, Rich Richmond.
Hello.
And he's running for CSM. We'll find out the results of that on Monday. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show, too, as we look at some predictions for tomorrow's results. Also running for CSM is Sutonia.
Hey.
And we will remember one of our senior staffers, Artemis Albosa from Noir.
Howdy, howdy.
You'll recognize his voice also from Declarations of War. That's another podcast. Also with us is Nick Bison there. How you doing, Nick?
It's a good day. Happy Father's Day to all you dads out there.
That's right. Thanks. Turn you up just a little bit. And also from Talking in Stations, one of our new members, Ren. How you doing, Ren?
Pretty good.
Okay, and a bit later, we're going to try to see if we can drag Vily in to talk a little bit about the war. He should be in a few minutes. Okay, today we'll do like a review of the week, and we'll get into some of the bigger topics later on with some commentary. Let's just have a quick look at what we did this week on Talking in Stations. On, I think it was Tuesday, we did the Gallente Federation Day, which is happening now, right? I think even CCP is having a simultaneous stream to this one about the Federation Day and Federation celebrations. Did you guys catch any of the videos or fanfare about that?
I saw the pop-ups in-game, which are rather fun.
Yeah.
I'm quite impressed with the way that CCP has been doing those pretty regularly now. Even though we have like multiple concurrent running things, I think there's Federation Day, we've got the most recent Abyss Challenge thingamabob going on. It'll just let you know about all of them, which is really cool.
Unfortunately, I've only heard complaints about the recent Abyssal Proving Grounds challenge.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird format because it's a 2v2v2, so it's a free team FFA. But the way the free teams play out is kind of weird because obviously if you want to win, you have to play like really safe and passive because the best way to win obviously is to have the two teams fight each other and then you come in at the end. So a lot of people are just avoiding each other and like a lot of the matches are going to like taking up a ton of time because a lot of people want to play optimally and avoid each other. And there's also quite a bit of collusion going on between alliances where like alliances are queuing multiple teams at the same time, and then if they get a third party team then and two of them in the arena, then they just smash that one team and then they fight each other afterwards. And there's been a few complaints about that too. So it's a bit of a weird format. I kind of wish if CCP was going with the FFA, go with 4 teams because then it's then you don't have the awkward with the odd amount of teams with 3 teams. So you're probably more incentivized to like fight each other at the start. And then also if there was 4 teams as well, it'd be a bit harder to collude because if you get 2 teams from the same alliance, the 2 neutral alliances could, or the 2 neutral teams could just say, okay, let's smash these guys. Of course, they could put 3 teams versus 1 and smash them, but then it takes like a lot more effort to do it, and you're losing more, right? Because 2 of your teams are losing instead of just 1 of your teams when that situation happens.
They can't seem to win, can they? There's
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, I think the Battleship 1v1 format that they did about, was it last week? That was really, really good.
Yeah, but I think like the Proving Grounds themselves, have they improved over time? Because there was a lot of complaints about collusion early on.
I think they have. The problem is with collusion, right, is that CCP banned people queuing multiple characters or multiple accounts to go into different arenas to feed themselves, but they didn't ban organized collusion as long if it's done by like real people. So they fixed one part of it, but they haven't fixed the second part of it. And big alliances can just ping and say, "Hey, let's just all queue at the same time." And if we get neutrals, we kill them first, and we have house rules where we agree okay, we kill these guys first, and then afterwards, we fight it out amongst ourselves. You also have like win trading there, where you're like, hey, we take this win, you get the next one, right? Like things like that are happening in these FFAs. But it would be really hard for CCP to police it. So
It's been pretty hit and miss, I'd say, because you also have certain groups who would just say, "Oh, we won't queue when you're about to queue, and we'll only queue when you are in one, and that way we never fight each other."
Well, that only really happened in the first 3 FFAs, though, because there were people who had really blinged out setups. In particular, I think the only people who really did that were like Goring Clade, and it was mostly because they were the guys like U Millennium, etc., who were running the like 500 mil maulers and the 3 bill mower setups, and they were like deliberately telling each other when they were queuing, so they didn't queue into each other, so that way they wouldn't have to, fight 500 mil maulers against 500 mil mowers, where they're going to lose ISK. So
I'd say the past few free for alls, they've all been sort of hit and miss. And we can't underestimate we can't underestimate the ability of people to deliberately try to undermine whatever system CCP puts in.
Yeah, I think some of them work pretty well, like the frigate and the destroyer FFAs, because they tend to be so cheap that they're fine, really. And if there is a bit of collusion, it doesn't really matter that much. But when it's like the 18-man FFA where like there's 10 people from one alliance in it, it's really bad. Or when you have like this team format where the queue is really slow because it's because you need to get a second person, and then you end up going against it. It hurts a ton more, especially since this was like such a limited format.
I mean, I'm not familiar very much with the Gallente lore. Is collusion and politics and that thematic for the Gallente?
It pretty much is, right?
Is it appropriate that this particular session is really bad with it?
Scheming and plotting and
the Gallente Federation is basically if Alex Jones was right instead of wrong, right? all of the like shadowy politics kind of stuff that the Gallente leadership do by having their leadership meetings, below the. Was that I don't know the law enough. I think Astrophy will be really. There's like this diamond city, right, or this like super rich city, and all of their secret meetings happen underneath that city, because if anyone were to. Because there's so much tourism, there's so many different races and people from all over, like Kaldari Amar visiting it. So if there was ever to be like a bombardment there, they would end up killing so many of their own civilians that they wouldn't. They can't like
human shields, huh?
Yeah, they can't stop the like Gallente secret meetings that are happening below the surface.
Wow.
Well, scheming and plotting and intrigue is a factor that isn't limited by any race or faction or border or anything really, and everybody does it.
All right.
Yeah, the Gallente and Kaldari stuff is a bit more subtle though in the lore, right? Rather than Amar and Mimitar, where it's a lot more sort of obvious.
Yeah. So another thing is here's a sample of this is a live video.
You're muted, Mataro, or you're roboting.
I must be roboting. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thanks. The Gallente Federation daily gifts, if you've been picking them up, you should make sure to get the last one. I'll do that right now. I'll just claim that last gift, and this is skill points, so don't forget to do that. There's login rewards coming through for the last 5 days. Okay, so that was on Tuesday we actually took Monday off, and then we had some other stuff that was interesting here. On, this is funny. Wednesday, we talked about a lot of things, but one of the things was that Goonswarm killed one of their own Nixes because the guy was going to defect. Did you guys hear about that guy?
Yeah, he was the guy who plainly said it in local, right? That he was going to defect or something. Then he also posted a bunch of slurs in local while goons were killing him. So, I mean, it was kind of like... I don't really feel that bad for him.
Yeah.
I don't understand. There's a pretty clear-cut system that Noraus and the rest of Pappy had already set out. We talked about it months ago, but I guess he wanted to... he wanted to go loud.
He feels like the kind of pilot that Noraus and the rest of Pappy would not want to accept.
Yeah, like at least after what he was typing local.
Well, he's no longer a liability to anyone, for now.
Like one of my coworkers once said, it was uneventful the day I got hired, but it'll be on YouTube when I leave.
We recently had someone like that on TIS with a 5,000 person ping that went out on his departure, which, you know, is kind of an abuse, but we'll overlook that. Anyway, so that was one of the things that happened that day. There was probably something that we didn't cover in the last few episodes. A couple Keepstars went down. One on behalf of the Imperium in what is that? 3 Tech.
3 Tech DMT.
Thank you, 3 Tech DMT. Yes, and also there was another one that went down for Horde, I believe, for Pappy, and that was like, I don't have it handy, but that was in a different area. So Keepstars are going down.
To clarify, when you say by going down, are they placing them or just throwing them?
No, placing them. Good call. Placing them. Anchoring. I should say anchoring, not going down. Is there any significance between these Keepstars? Is there significance to Keepstars anymore?
See, that's my question with the Keepstars being placed in the 1DQ constellation. I mean, I'll be the first to admit, like, these people are probably playing the game at a level that I will never reach. But I just don't understand why you're spending your money on more Keepstars. Like, if the constellation falls, it doesn't matter how many Keepstars are there. We saw that with the rest of Delph. So I'm not really sure what putting Keepstar number whatever is going to do to bolster the defense. I'm not even sure if it's
3 Tech D Keepstar that Goons put down. I mean, it makes sense to put it there though, because that's like that's the chokehold, right? Where all of the force is coming in from Pappy, and by having a Keepstar there, it means that it's a lot easier for them to like just have their supers in the system because they have a place where they can dock. It's a lot safer to jump in and you can just dock instead of being tethered on a Fortizar or something where, you know, maybe someone's going to make a mistake. So I guess it just makes things more secure for them. And also I think it's more of a morale thing, right? Like, you're not going to break us. We put a Keepstar down.
I've heard that before. We'll talk more about this later when Vily gets here. But the morale thing, it's kind of like being a celebrity for being a celebrity. Like, it's almost like self-referencing too much. Like, hey, we put down a Keepstar. Its real purpose is to raise our morale. Therefore, our morale is raised. Feels a little artificial. And I've heard that before, Suetonia. That's why I comment on it.
From a defensive standpoint, they're already, they have compressed interior lines. They're already dug in. Adding to that defense just adds a level of complexity to the attackers. So, yeah, I can actually understand it.
Oh, Rubicon actually says that Goons already had a Keepstar in their system, actually. So it was actually just the second one that they put down.
It was closer to the gate, though, which might make a difference for, I don't know,
it gives you
maybe
a safe place to just, park supers and fighters to the gate or something.
Yeah. All right,
well I think we should get Vily to talk about it because there is a comment I made in another Discord and it's pinned. This is complicated. I don't think I have enough experience or knowledge to make an informed decision.
That's what they pinned, that comment?
Yes, because it's seen as, I guess, revolutionary. Somebody would admit to this.
Yeah, what are you doing on a talk show? All right. Well, let's move on. There was more stuff that happened this week. We had, let's see if I can grab it here. We had the Pochven guys on. This is an interview that we wanted to get on right away. They were busy actually setting their own structures, timers, so they could be destroyed. They were going to destroy their own timers. And the Pochven guys are basically Strybog and what is the other one? Kybernauts, and there's a third one that has 3 names on it that Zero is a part of. So the 3 out of 4 Triglavian groups decided they're going to destroy their own structures because they don't want to be prisoners to timers. They don't want to play that game. And we came on and we had them. And really for them, that session was a big Pochven is broken session. Like I couldn't get them to talk about much except they wanted to say Pochven is broken. This is what we've been dealing with.
They've been very frustrated about the whole thing. I guess they have a right to be because they talked about the extent of the problems they've had over the last 11 months. And Pochven is a very young region. It's barely 11 months, crossing into a year old. And compared to the rest of E, which dwarfs it by more than tenfold. And they expressed their concerns about how, for the majority of it, it sucked. From the early periods where it was a frontier and people began first settling it, it was terrible. And they only had a brief respite before things started collapsing and people started going into it, Pochven, with the intention to just harm the ecosystem. And now what we have with the gates and standings open, people flooding in and just... then they don't find it fun anymore.
Was that post on Reddit about the guide to stealing the loot from some sort of dread site? Is that legit or is that just a troll? Does anybody know?
That is legit.
It was tongue in cheek. It was written by the guys whose loot's being stolen. So they said and told everyone how their loot was being stolen, and they were pissed off that this is all this guy had to do to steal their loot.
Well, yeah. So basically, they were saying, look, there's nothing really lucrative inside of Pochven. It's been broken, and we've been, as a group, basically helping CCP fix things. And the only thing that was really lucrative was this dread site. And the dread site you could even do in this really easy way that was almost like an exploit. And so everything is just kind of screwed up in Pochven, and CCP won't give it the attention that it deserves. And now they opened up the gates, we call it. But what that means is they've made the requirement to have standing with Triglavians in order to move around inside of Pochven no longer a requirement, which means anybody can come into Pochven and now move system to system with a few exceptions. And that allows really groups that were bigger to move in because their members don't have to go and farm standings in order to do it. And that's a very interesting thing because if that's all it took to keep big groups out of Pochven, it tells you the state of nullsec, doesn't it? Or bigger groups from nullsec. They're not willing to do a little PvE grinding as a group in order to be able to access a certain area in the game. They are literally not interested in grinding at all for that sort of thing.
I think that's partially true, right? Like there definitely are SIGs that would probably do that. Right. I don't know. There was some goons, right, who were doing it already in Pochven, who were working with Stribolg. So that there are people from alliances that do that, but obviously it's more of a like a special interest group thing rather than something that then a whole alliance would do, because a whole alliance isn't really interested in it.
It kept things small. It was a gate that protected them from, I guess, groups that would otherwise crush them if they were in K-space. I quite liked it because it created a funnel, created a filter. And now without the funnel and the filter, this clean pond, the way I see it, this fresh ocean is now being polluted.
Well, question coming. Coming out of the chat from Low Dissipates. Did anyone think that Pochven could get removed or reverted at some point, or is it here to stay forever? My personal
absolutely opinion, not. It's staying here forever.
Yeah, it's here to stay. It will morph and change, and we may see other things similar to it, but it ain't going away, I don't believe.
All right. I don't think CCP will get rid of Pochven. Like, they won't revert it back to high sec or whatever. Like, maybe they'll revert gate changes, but I really doubt it. So,
all right. I want to welcome Vily to the program. How are you doing, Vily?
Doing great. How are you? Good.
Let me turn you up, or can you speak a little louder?
I speak as I speak.
Okay.
Probably.
I turned you up. We're talking about Pochven now, and somebody asked a question about Pochven. Is it going to stick around? Yes. There was a different question. I think Sutonia just talked about it. We're talking about the desire for nullsec to get into Pochven and how he said, well, SIGs would do it, not necessarily a whole group or an alliance. And one of the SIGs that was in there, maybe not a SIG, but a group of people were Goonswarm, had some people in there. And one of the things that Moldavius said that he regretted the most was not understanding how tainted you become by operating with allies in nullsec. In his case, Goonswarm. And Vily, that was something that ProGod commented on. I don't know if you did too, but did you see them, Strybog, as Goonswarm affiliates?
Absolutely. I mean, he's openly admitted on multiple shows that they are an Imperium ally, that, you know, they're not going to be in a position to shoot Imperium ever. So, you know, that their primary diplomat is a member of Goonswarm right now. It created a situation where there was no way for us to treat them as anything but Imperium.
Who's their primary diplomat?
I don't know. It was part of a discussion somewhere else. I don't know who it actually was, but that was a statement he made. Me, right? I wasn't even tracking that.
The other thing is Brisk is Strybog's second CSM candidate, I believe.
Yeah, I asked him that after, because we interviewed him and then that came out. So I said, hey, if you don't want to look like you're affiliated with nullsec, why do you have Brisk, who's going to need the help to be the third Imperium candidate, on your number 2 ballot? Why would you do that? And he said that has nothing to do with being allied with them. He's somebody they believe in.
I mean, I can speak to that to a certain extent, because Declarations of War did a similar thing. Alec is not a big null block person, but he thinks that Brisk is just a good CSM candidate. Go ahead, Vily, you were saying something.
Well, no, like there's no point in, if that's, the way they want to play it, but it's much simpler. Like, if you're Pochven and you actually care about the Pochven space, as they claim to have done, then their ticket should have been Pochven candidate 1, Pochven candidate 2, Pochven candidate 3. There's very little alternative, in my opinion, to make a claim that Pochven is what we care about and then not support Pochven candidates.
Could it be a situation like that's going on in Wormholes, where the whole community can't get around and like they don't trust the other residents of their own space?
No, because they're allied in this effort to destroy all their own stuff together. They appeared on the show together. They do fight each other when there was nothing else going on, but it was almost like arranged fighting. It wasn't actual aggressive fighting. They weren't actually going after each other's structures. Very different than Wormholers, I think. Wormholers, they disagree on the mechanics.
The Wormhole community as a whole has an incredible problem with their inability to come together to pick a candidate. And they even now struggle to accept that Izuki, when he was on the CSM, did incredibly important things for them. They treat it as a situation where, I was listening to somebody the other day tell me, oh, Izuki was a terrible Wormhole candidate. He just, pushed for things that helped his group in Wormholes. And like, I actually worked with Izuki when he was on the CSM, and Izuki did more for Wormholes than, this person will ever know. But, the Wormhole consensus is that Izuki was terrible. And it's unfortunate, because these groups that need this representation can never seem to come together to put forward a candidate that will help their group as a whole, right?
I think it's a matter of coexistence, because in the case of Pochven and these groups claiming that, well, they may claim that they're not part of Imperium and such, but it seems even interacting or being friends with some people see it as being tainted by that, and the inability to, well, believe in mutual coexistence and tolerate each other. It leads to these things. I think this is one of the big issues in Wormhole space, that the groups.
Well, the Pochven thing's a little bit different than Wormholes.
The Pochven thing is definitely, yes, definitely, because I mean, it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, flies and floats on water like a duck. I would certainly say that Strybog and a lot of the other Pochven residents are, generally speaking, in some way related to the Imperium and can be considered an Imperium extension.
Well, they deny that.
How far.
Make clear that when we were talking with them, they were like, no, look, it's just a few guys we knew. I asked him about his own background in Goonswarm. He said he was in the Fountain War for a bit. He had really nothing to do with it. I'm talking about Moldavius, the leader of Strybog. But they were really playing down their ties with Goonswarm and how they really didn't want to have anything to do with nullsec. That's why they were in Pochven in the first place. But I think
is fair. Like it's fair to say that. But the reality is the Imperium wasn't playing down those ties, they were playing up those ties, right? Imperium members were on this very Discord, bleating consistently about how much money they were making in Pochven, how, much they were controlling the Pochven space. These were not, Maldavis's members, these were Imperium members. And if he wanted to shut that down at any point, he certainly could have. But he made the decision not to because these were his allies, right? And these were the people that when he decided to start picking some fights with the other locals, who he called for backup and who would show up with 50 battleships and a nullsec FC to support him.
Well, interestingly, I was listening to INN and Push to Talk yesterday. It's a long show, and in the middle of it, Arendis really gets aggravated at Dawn Rhea from Theta and lays into her about how Pochven guys, Triglavians, deserve to get worked over because they can't hack it, basically, but more so because they started throwing around the name Goonswarm, which is their fault, and they deserve to get destroyed because of it. I hope I'm characterizing it correctly. They should never have, according to him, they should never have thrown around the Goonswarm brand because that led to people wanting to destroy them like Vily. But you're saying that, oh no, it was Goonswarm that was talking up that relationship.
Well, it was both sides to a degree, but the side I saw talking about much more was the Imperium, using it as a propaganda point to say, hey guys, look, we're not losing, we're making a ton of money in Pochven, we've got all this extra stuff to do, kind of thing, that from that angle, right? There certainly was more than a few instances where they used the Imperium allied status to try and push around smaller entities. I actually had that being showed to me where they, a diplomat from, Pochven would attempt to, what would you say, push down smaller entities, say, look at us, we've got, this backing, don't mess with us kind of thing, do what we say. So to say that they were interconnected is obviously true. To say that, one side or the other pushed that relationship, I think they both pushed it,
whenever it was useful, and then denied it whenever it was useful. Yeah.
Whether people like it or not, I think it should be quite clear who you surround yourself with. People will think you are associated with them. Who you surround yourself with, it becomes who you are in some way. You might not think this way, but others do.
It's important to understand, though, with all that being said, that's not what sunk them in Pochven in the end, right? It's just the reality that they, as a small group, were unable to defend their space effectively enough and with enough fervor that it became fun for other people to come attack them, right? One of the unfortunate lessons everyone in nullsec learns is that you do not want to encourage good fights when people attack you, right? You want to make sure that those fights are not fun, because otherwise people are encouraged to come back again, and that means you have to defend again, and it creates this kind of unfortunate self-fulfilling prophecy, or I believe Durr used to call it like maybe the tragedy of the commons or something. I can't remember what the exact terminology is, but basically if you focus on good fights while the defender, then more people will show up to attack you, and you will have to keep being the defender over and over and over again, and that becomes unsustainable very quick. It's an unfortunate piece of the cycle of nullsec life, why the Helldunker blue balls or many of these other things that people hate about nullsec are so common.
What do you think of the contention there that initially, with gate restrictions and not being able just to filament in and out at basically at your leisure, I know that's an oversimplification, but with those changes prior to that, it was kind of to compare them as a nullsec entity, I think is a little unfair. How much do you think those changes really brutalized it?
They definitely helped a little. There's no doubt about that. To say that they were the core cause, I don't know if that's accurate. The gate restriction, the standing issues, effectively enabled them to have these very pocketed systems that allowed them to have access to this PvE resource that they exploited to the best of their ability. And there's no doubt that they and many other people were quite happy with the way the system was, where nobody else could get into their goodies, let's say. And they, much like everyone else, were perhaps aware of how overpowered that was, and advocated for, allowing people to move around the Pochven area without requiring the standings. So the fact that it is now
CCP provided super cap umbrella.
A second, sorry.
I'm sorry, making a poor joke that basically they had a CCP provided super cap umbrella.
Well, no, it's not really equivalent so much as it would be more like the only way to get into, a nullsec system is if you had access to the, ACL jump bridge would probably be the better way to describe it or compare.
Suetonia, let me throw this out to you and Artemis. It's both, smaller entities. The filaments seem to be something that was universally loved by players. I was a little skeptical myself, but I just heard nothing but glowing reviews about it from everyone. Now filaments seem to be the problem in wormholes and in Pochven too. Do you guys have opinions on the story of filaments?
Well, the Pochven filaments in wormholes is a new phenomenon, a new problem, basically, right? Where people are using, because of the recent Marauder changes mostly, people are now able to run like high-end sites, like C5 sites with mass Marauders instead of having to use Dreadnoughts. And a tactic that they're using to avoid PvP is whoever's tackled by the rats, because the rats will only ever tackle one person, they kick that person from fleet, and then fleet warp off to a safe spot, and then they Pochven filament out. And because everyone is kind of aware of the Pochven mechanics now, you'll almost always land within basically an area where you can get a high sec wormhole out or use a filament to get back out to high sec. So there isn't really much problem with getting stuck in Pochven anymore. That's the issue that the wormhole guys have with the Pochven filaments.
Yeah, and the Pochven filaments were good when they were used to provide easier access to PvP opportunities. They're bad when they're used to avoid PvP opportunities.
So let me clarify that, Suetonia, for my own understanding, that most people, in order to do sites, would have to use dreads, which you can't filament with. But since the Marauder became powerful enough and to be used for these sites, those were used, and those could be filamented out.
Yeah, you can't filament with capitals to Pochven, or use any of the needlejack filaments either.
Basically, what they're saying is that, a Marauder is about, 75% of a Hodred, with about 10% of the risk.
Yeah, you can use like 12 to 15 like Marauders / battleships, you splash in a few nesters or whatever, and that's about the same cost as running what they used to do as like 3 dreads. But you only lose one Marauder in the worst case normally. You just kick the guy who's tackled from fleet, and then you will fleet warp off and then filament out. Whereas with dreadnoughts, obviously with siege mechanics, worst case is you're losing everything on the grid.
Yeah. So what's interesting is, and this happened before, right? Because if you look at it on the grand scale of things, one of the reasons that we're in this era of scarcity is because there was a combination of interesting features that CCP put into the game that combined created a situation that was untenable. And this looks like that same kind of feature combination creep happening again, right? The first time we saw it with skill injectors, with super caps and Rorqual mining, and you created an umbrella situation. Nobody saw any one of those things as a problem, but all of it combined with skill injectors as the catalyst created replicatable money-making machines in nullsec that were very secure. And here you have the same thing. Filaments, people like filaments, but in combination with a boost they give to a battleship, now you start seeing how this mutates into a problem. Interesting.
Vily.
Yeah, I don't think people have a problem with people using the filaments to find PvP. It's only using the Pochven filaments mostly to avoid PvP. PvP. I think there's another edge case as well where you can use them to get your stuff out very easily during an eviction as well.
In wormhole space?
Yeah, because you can just undock from your staging fort if it's getting attacked and killed, and you can't really cover a fort with bubbles, obviously, because of PDS and the footers are defenses. So the guys, if you want to save your ships, you don't have to like battle your way through a wormhole to get your stuff out. You can just like undock, warp to a safe spot, and filament it out if it's not a capital ship.
You don't even have to have the issue with the bubbles because you've got nullification now on blockade runners, so you can just warp to wherever the fuck you want and hit filament.
Sure, that too, but I mean, like, you can just basically like save the ships wholesale, right? You can just undock your marauder, warp to a safe spot.
You say, and they're doing this from a structure, right? So unless it's an Astros with no PDS, and even with a Astros, you still have a bomb launcher you can use to clear bubbles every few seconds or every 20 seconds or whatever. They're always going. They don't need an interdiction nullifier. They're just going to literally just undock, warp to a safe, and filament out.
Yeah, then you can just dock in Pochven, right? Then you just kill yourself in the station, and you just come back in with a shuttle and repeat.
Rich, you had something?
Yeah, Vily, with the Pochven situation, would you say the leaders of these Pochven groups are politically inexperienced when they start doing these good fight type of mentality? That would you say if you could abandon the whole Hell Dunk or Blue Balls mentality that Nullsec has, you would?
It's not about like abandoning or not understanding the mentality. It's about human nature, right? If people see good fights, they will go to the good fights, right? The Pochven situation had all these really cool battleship brawls. I can assure you, a lot of people looked at Reddit when those battle reports happened and said, "That looks really fucking fun. I want to go do that."
Yeah.
It creates a situation where more people are going to show up next time, and more people are going to show up next time. Then the only question becomes which side of those people that are showing up on. And invariably, if you have not properly prepared the ground, they're going to come in there against you.
It sounds similar to a PvP problem I've discovered. You can have a fun that's mechanically engaging and challenging. You can have a fight that's meaningful. You can have a fight that's fun, and you can have a fight that's flashy. But getting all of those things together into one, it's really difficult. And if you just have flashy fights or fun fights, well, more and more people will come, and it's just not sustainable. Do you think they're inexperienced in this aspect when it comes to running an alliance of that size? What mistake did they make?
I'm not quite sure I understand, honestly. Like the reality is, are they inexperienced? Sure. But, did that inexperience play a heavy factor? It's debatable. There's a combination of mechanics changes. There's a combination of, picking the wrong fights, choosing the wrong allies. There's a ton of things that worked against them. Yeah, you could say that alliance leadership and experience played a role in there, but it's just as likely an experienced alliance leader would have made many of those same decisions.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Strigborg were picked on because they were feeding fleets and giving good fights. I think it was mostly because they were very outspoken about a select group of players stealing ISK from them, especially when that ISK was fairly safe at the time, right before the gates, when they were complaining about the crab siding, which kind of meant that a lot of people kind of wanted to go out their way to troll them a little bit. And it was also like the siding with Imperium thing. Not that they were like, they were just feeding battleships to people or something. It was more of the other things.
We spoke about having 3 of the major Pochven powerhouses on. I'd like to one day bring on the independent one, the one that came to Pochven and grinded up the standings as a group before the whole gate restrictions were removed. I'm curious to what Rote Capel would say about the whole situation.
Let's get them in here. We'll do that sometime this week. Okay, so that's it about Pochven. Let's see if we can move on to real war going on in Delve now that we have Vily here. There's been some movements. We brought the question up a little earlier, Vily. I'll repose it. There was a pair of Keepstars that went up and were anchored and online. One for the Goon Swarm or the Imperium, and one for Horde and Pappy, I believe. Are these two structures significant in any way?
In my opinion, they're not. Both structures are about fortifying defensive positions and are useful in that they decrease the ability of the enemy for each side to harass the other side's localized gate control. So for us, it means they're less able to harass the Ecotech Victor jump bridge and the surrounding system, and for them it is much the same, where it increases their ability to hold the 3-D system on the E-Tech V gate specifically, because they already did Keepstar on the other gate. In my opinion, I don't know if that actually increases their jump bridge protection, because the fights change the dynamic where they're happening closer to the gate, it actually helps us a little, but it definitely increases their ability to use capitals and supers on that gate in terms of skynetting or whatever.
Right. That is
in the scheme
drones
of things
to the gate. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's sending fighters. In the scheme of things, does it really change anything? In my opinion, it doesn't. Some people may disagree, and that's fine. But it's both people or both groups being aware of the situation, understanding the mechanics, and utilizing, Keepstar holes to increase their ability to control and handle the situation, basically.
Well, these new Keepstars are aiming towards the gate insta-undock, right?
Of course, yes.
So, Joni, would you fight on a gate with a Keepstar on an insta-undock with a bunch of people there?
I mean, it fortifies the position. I don't know if it changes, like, if you take the fight or not, really, in terms of small gang. It just means they can respond, like, maybe 20 seconds faster. It doesn't change a whole lot.
I don't know. I go to Frat's system in Fortac Harry. I don't want to fight on the Keepstar grid with the gate on an instant undock. That's... Well, it's fortified defense. It's... You can instantly undock and just get straight into a fight. Oh, I don't like to fight on that Keepstar gate.
I mean, the main relevant strategic advantage, right, is that you can have supers tethered on the Keepstar and send fighters over to the gate.
All right. Well, let's talk about the war in general. Vily, can you bring us up to date on some of the stuff's happened over the last 3 or 4 weeks? We intend to talk a lot more about the war now that people are stepping away from the game a little bit. They probably want to know what's going on. We know it's quiet, but there's definitely things happening. We'll talk about initiative in a minute and talk about Esoteria and stuff, but is there anything in Delve proper that's going on between the two major parties?
For the most part, not really. The Imperium is inside of the 1DQ constellation. Everything outside of the 1DQ constellation is under PAPI, test, whatever control. The Imperium is sending out bomber groups to harass local PvE industry-related stuff, and is occasionally coming out to harass iHubs or whatever, and then kind of running back as soon as a reasonable sized response fleet shows up, which greatly reduces the likelihood of larger size fights, as everybody kind of sees. There just isn't the large Munin or hack brawls that we've had for the majority of the war anymore, just because anytime the Imperium goes more than a jump or two outside of the 1DQ area, they're effectively in a situation where they could be kind of trapped out, I guess you could say. So those hack fleets just aren't proceeding outside of the constellation. They're going out with bombers and they're coming back in with bombers. And
that's has things changed a little? Because like whenever I haven't been following the war recently, but whenever I click on a stream like Ron's stream or like one of the Imperium streamers, I always just see destroyer fights, like Tech 1 destroyer fights. Like people
people always now. Yeah, there's no shortage of Caracol and Thrasher and whatever. It's just people being bored and having fun, right? You've got this entity on the other side that is, not really going to give you a great fight if you bring anything big. So if you show up in Munins, it's like you're on a very short clock in terms of what's going to happen. But if you show up in Thrashers or Caracals, everybody knows that it's not a strategic level engagement. So you're able to get some reasonable fight out of it, I guess you could say. So they run Caracals or Thrashers through the gate, and we run Caracals and Thrashers through the other gate. And occasionally there's other things like Towers or other random stuff. But as long as people keep the ship types below a certain level, nobody considers it a real threat, so everybody responds to it in a much more pleasant way, if that kind of makes sense. And, obviously we throw away a lot of them, they throw away a lot of them. It's just very common and continual.
I've noticed one of the major Imperium groups actually, they're not in the war. They've gone somewhere up north to harass what I consider either a fledgling alliance or just a civilian target. I've seen Initiative head up to Geminate to attack weapons of mass production as they move in away from Pureblind to Geminate to expand.
I'm sure Matterall can talk about Initiative. I think he's got a section plan for that or something.
We'll get to that in just a second.
I do have a question, like in reference to the throwaway fleets and everything. It is very much a question coming from a place of ignorance. I just do not understand how the Imperium manages to maintain their supplies. Like, where is the IS coming from? How are they getting all the ore in? As someone who's not experienced in like big nullsec industry, or how important it is to the battles you guys have on a daily basis, like any insights into, is that something you can interfere with?
So the jump freighter lines from Empire to Delve go through NPC Delve. And the amount of ore you can fit inside a jump freighter in terms of compressed ore, you could probably fit an entire, 10 entire T1 destroyer fleets inside of one jump freighter. To be honest, there's probably even more than that. Like, the compression rate when you're turning compressed ore into T1 destroyers is insane, let's say. So there's never going to be any real crunch in terms of supplies for T1 destroyers. And much the same, the way that Tech 2 materials are brought down, you could run a jump freighter down with 500 bill in terms of Tech 2 moon materials, because of the way the moon materials are set up, because they're still reacting in 1DQ. So you're not going to be able to realistically cut off either of those supply lines if even a couple jump freighters are going to be able to make it through. We've done some preliminary work in terms of setting up a possible containment of the supply lines, but at this point the time investment just isn't worth the, what would you say, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. It might be at a later point, but for right now, the logistics and supply lines of Delve are constrained a little bit, because that's the really only way to bring in supplies aside from wormholes, which is not a reliable supply route. And that kind of is what it is.
So some of the things that I've heard are that, and I forget where I got this reference, but that the idea right now of the war is switching to more to massive containment, which means destroy everything outside of 1DQ constellation. Make sure that's completely suppressed, which tells us something about Bastion being purged from Esoteria and Fate the Ballis. Is that the plan right now? Is something going on?
Containment is a tricky word, and that narrative has been kind of pushed by goons as soon as Redline kind of gave them that opportunity.
Right, he's the one that coined that. Yep.
The reality is that the way we're choosing to play this is very slow at the moment, where COVID lockdowns are ending, everybody's hitting summer, everybody's been involved in this war for almost a year now. We're coming up on the anniversary soon, and there's no big incentive for us to push hard this week versus next week versus any other week. Mm-hmm. We're in a situation where our siege is ongoing, and the defensive measures they've got are well set up, and neither of those things are likely to change in any realistic way. So we're more than able to take time and go around the galaxy and clear out all of their other minor allies and anybody that's assisting them, and just take them apart one by one as they're kind of stuck in the 1DQ constellation and can't project any power out there, while all of those small groups are left alone to die and kind of wither. And invariably that strengthens our black line while weakening their, I don't know what you call it, extended line, their side allies.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely from like a line member, fleet member perspective, it is a whole lot more fun to fly around and destroy some Bastion Fortizars than to try again for the who knows how many time to destroy a jump bridge.
With the same ships over and over again that are expendable and.
Well, the funny thing is, like, destroying a jump bridge in any of the 1D constellation things was never kind of the goal, because destroying a jump bridge itself doesn't actually do anything. It's always about, in the end, kind of an iHub or structures that, has or friendly anchoring structures, I guess you could say. It has a much more important actual connotation.
All right, well, let's switch gears to Esoteria. I think Bastion is there. And this is a message from Fulcrum. Mango is cleaning up Esoteria. Mango is a member of PAPI. Many think that we are not. So he's reiterating loyalty to the PAPI effort. We have killed all hostile Fortizars in Esoteria now and reclaimed most of the Sov. I think Mango will keep pushing into Fate the Ballas and Impasse if the Delve situation remains stable. But not sure about that part yet. Their intention is to request PAPI High Command to resume their PvE activities, but most Mangos seem to love PvP. Mango start forming Alliance PvP fleets for a week. Our past 7-day active member count dropped to 120. It was 500 plus. Now it's about 380. That's a good indication of how AOM is doing.
With the civilian infrastructure of PAPI, with a lot of the military assets being pushed out to the front, how are the more civilian-sided things, the rental groups and the less PvP-focused groups doing in this war? Obviously, I believe all of the Imperium's civilian groups have been turned to ashes and scattered somewhere.
So the Imperium's allies in Dracarys and Red Alliance are still existing in Catch and Impasse, and there's a little bit of space in Faithabilis that they are occupying as well, and it's very likely that those will come under view, let's say, soon. But we always get busy as well, and maybe they don't. But it's very clear that anybody that is affiliated with the Imperium outside of 1DQ is on a tree with no leaves for cover, I guess you could say. Just because the way that the system has worked is that they're all stuck in 1DQ, and if you're not stuck in 1DQ with them, then there's no way for them to really support in any heavily meaningful way.
There was an initiative deployment in the Great Wildlands, and we spoke about it on Talked In Stations a few weeks ago.
Hold on to initiative there. You keep jumping the gun. We're going to talk about it. But first I want to, let's talk about allies here. We're talking about AOM and Esoteria, and they said they're going to continue that campaign. After that, they may actually extend it, depending on the situation. We just heard that from Fulcrum. So let's look at the allies in this war. I was comparing notes with somebody. What has happened to some of the allies inside of PAPI, and what has happened to the allies inside of Goonswarm? And does what happens to these allies, tell us anything about the conditions of the war over the last period? And do you guys have any thoughts on that?
So, I mean, when it comes to PAPI or Test, a lot of our smaller and side groups had a lot of trouble or struggle during the December to May period between early M2 or pre-M2 and especially post-M2, where a lot of the backup support was just lost as we had to focus on the M2 extraction at the time. And that created opportunities for initiative to deploy into the backlines and make some progress. And obviously it was quite problematic for Legacy. And that was quite bad. After that, however, in the last couple months, almost all of those organizations, aside from a few, have been in rebuilding processes, taking new space, focusing on developing their own alliance infrastructure again, etc. And for the most part, things are going quite well, in my opinion, for those groups.
Are these civilian groups still in the back lines, or have they moved up more towards the front now?
What do you mean by a civilian group?
Sorry,
Third
rental
party
groups, less PvP, third-party groups, smaller coalition members.
Well, there's no such thing as a third-party group that.
Well,
there's
initiative
coalition members. And
initiative
not
couldn't.
coalition members.
But Vily, initiative couldn't really, because of time zone tanking, effectively take legacy out of their space. So they kind of use.
Yeah, they required Dread Bomb.
Yeah, they used Dread Bomb, and they used. I consider them a third party.
Yeah. Okay. So you're asking me what the status of Dread Bomb is? I mean, that's not.
No. Just
no. I'm asking about, say, Evictus. Already replaced those other legacy groups. Are they still in the back lines, or have they moved more forwards towards the front line and potentially a new home?
AARP lives in Delve. Evictus lives in Esoteria.
Mangoes is Paragon Soul.
Mangoes lives in Esoteria.
There's a
Requiem
whole
Eternal
host
lives
of...
in Period Basis. Like all the legacy alliances are, they've been through a bit, and they're focusing on rebuilding. Some closer to the front lines than others, but everybody within some proximity to the front lines through jump bridges. I don't think there's a single legacy alliance that's more than like 5 or 6 gates from from T5Z.
I'm very curious if you have anything you could share about what's going on in Fountain. I know when it was first formed, people were throwing around the idea that it was like a mini coalition within Pappy Coalition.
The Pappy boys, yeah.
Trailed off and like nobody cared anymore. Is there what's the deal there?
So, Fed Up, who is a legacy member, lives in Fountain with a couple constellations, and they've been working with some of their allies in the local area between Forsaken Empire and Sika and the alliance who shall not be named because it's not appropriate for Google. There's a variety of stuff going on there, but for the most part, they cleared the region of all, and Losecnia, sorry. They cleared the region of all hostile structures, and they've set up, and they're living there, and they're operating as kind of their own little mini coalition that is slightly connected to Pappy, but not really. And they've jokingly called themselves Fappy, which is just kind of a funny name, although it's not.
They came up with it.
As far as
okay.
As I said, it's a joke.
Yeah. No, it's funny.
It's just because it sounds fucking stupid. But
that's the best variation I've heard on Pappy so far, though. But go ahead.
And for the most part, Fountain is a very quiet region most of the time right now, from my understanding. And they're all having a good time, making money, and coming to Delve every once in a while.
Okay, so let's look on the other side of it. Goons, Suetonia, do you have one last thing?
I was going to say, I was interested to know what was going on with Siege Green, because for a while it seemed like Fraternity had hired them to shoot mangoes for a bit.
Right.
But now it seems like they're actually contributing to Fraternity's Pappy efforts, since they've been killing Dracarys and Against All Authorities a lot.
I'm not fully tracking how that situation unfolded, developed, etc., but that is my understanding, the result, which is that currently Siege Green is somewhere in the catch area dismantling Dracarys.
I mean, they're all similar time zones, so it's only natural, and it provides these two groups a chance to test their mettle and find entertainment.
Who was Dracarys aligned with? Pardon my ignorance.
Dracarys is Imperium.
Yeah, so that's over. Siege Green did come up and attack Esoteria, which is where Army of Mangoes was trying to kind of pacify the area. And they're still in the process of doing that, apparently. That lasted about 2 weeks. I don't think there was much progress, and they have now gone away. I believe Siege Green has moved down into Stain, if I'm not mistaken. So that's...
Oh, they're in Catch, because they're killing Dracarys stuff.
My bad. Okay, so they're after Dracarys now. So is that what you meant, Artemis? They're changing targets?
I was trying to understand which side of the whatever this war is being called now. World War B2, which side Dracarys was on. Because
I mean, they were hired by Fraternity apparently.
You're talking about Siege Green.
Mangoes and Fraternity have a bit of history between themselves, so it was a bit interesting that Norris had put them in Esoteria because it was kind of conflicting with sort of Pappy's goals a little bit. But now it seems like they are kind of back on the right page, right? Going into catch, killing Pappy enemies.
Dracarys, yeah. So Dracarys is Imperium. So now Siege Green was being kind of used as a wedge. Naros denied it, or he played around with it, but AOM thinks that Naros sent Siege Green to mess with AOM to keep them off balance. And that ended, and now Siege Green went into Stain for a couple weeks, and now into Catch, and they're fighting Imperium related groups there. So Siege Green is a low set group, but they are fighting Pappy enemies at this moment. Whether they're hired by Naros or not, I don't know.
It's a bit of a tangent, so I apologize. Sure. But you mentioned Stain, and I recall that the Stain gate is officially a thing now. That's just completely meaningless to the current conflict? Just a little bit of an interesting side note, or is it actually meaningful in any way?
Oh, it is actually kind of interesting because it made the jumps from Empire Space to period basis a lot shorter. I think you can get to like the period basis side from Stain now within like 13 jumps of like Empire Space. I don't know if that's affected you at all, Vily.
Almost not at all, really. Like the people that want to go to period basis can go to period basis. Maybe it increases the roaming gang frequency there by 5% or something. But that's usually a healthy thing, not a bad thing. So.
All right, so we were looking at allies and how they fared during this war, and if that told us anything about how the war is actually going, right? Because everybody has different measurements on a war. Thank you very much for the gift subs there, Nick. But one thing you can look at is like how are the allies of the groups working out? And so you talked about Legacy having a hard time in December around M2 because they were getting burned out of Legacy space. They moved over into Delve, populated period basis, populated Quarius. Brave seems to be in pretty good shape in Quarius. On the other side, you had French Connection fold into Goonswarm, I think, or maybe even go inactive. You also saw your former allies, Siberian Squad, contend with Brave inside Aquarius. Who won that fight?
You can check .net for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to prompt you guys to give you time to talk.
Brave currently lives in Aquarius.
I have not heard about Siberian Squads at all. I do not know what they're doing. From what I've heard, they didn't fare well against Brave.
I think Vily sort of summarized this pretty well at the top, where he mentioned that when M2 was going on, the Pappy allies were struggling quite a bit. But now that there is a siege going on in 1DQ constellation, the Imperium allies are struggling. And I think that just goes to show that when it's good to be in a coalition when your coalition has forces to spare to protect you. But if your coalition is busy under siege, be it having their super fleets trapped in a system or the only space that they currently have is in a single constellation, then it's not going to be a good time for you.
Right.
Another thing as well, right? If you look at the alliances that lost corporations or lost like a lot of members, like if you track the members, like a lot of them just stay inside the coalition. Like a lot of the corporations, when Legacy was struggling a little bit, they either they joined Test as corps, or they joined the Victus as corps, or they joined as members if it was like a smaller corporation for the most part, right? Same with Imperium. A lot of the smaller alliances just get merged into Goonswarm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we also
Siberian Squads, based on their Z-kill,
it's pretty low.
Has
right?
40 active characters.
Yeah, that's pretty low.
40.
I mean, that wasn't that far off for what they had to begin with. I mean, they had like maybe 80 PvP characters.
Well, there was a big to-do when they joined Imperium. There was a big to-do about it. Like they were going to hold off.
Siberian Squads was in Quarius. They could form an 80-man fleet, not like.
Not 40 men in a month. Is that a month or a 7-day check?
This is a 7-day check.
Okay, so a week.
So yeah, in the last 7 days, they could form 40 people and got a total of 316 kills, with the majority of them going to one guy. That is worrying, and I know that Hanzo is a proud guy. I don't see him folding into the Imperium. At least I don't. The other group that defected was Red Alliance, and they're in Impasse doing Impasse things. I don't know what they're doing there. Vily, do you have any idea what Red Alliance are doing to the Fireco?
Losing? I'm calling in Dread Bomb. I mean, that is as much as that those statements are kind of short and pithy. They're also true, right? Red Alliance is much smaller than Fire. Fire's beating them up on pretty much every opportunity, and every once in a while they call in Dread Bomb and they're able to kind of score a win in U.S. time zone where Fire is weak. But for the most part, that is what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens to Red Alliance once Catch falls. Like, I think if Dracarys lose most of their space, Impasse is very closed off because you can only access it from 3 regions. And for the most part, like, I think there's only like 2 systems basically that you can come from. Like, the entire thing's like a closed off like cluster of pockets. And it's just like connected from like one pipe basically. So like as soon as like you lose Catch and Faith of Bodice, you're basically fucked in Impasse.
It's pretty open from the Faithablis angle. There's lots of angles of approach, but from the northern angles, it's very singular, and it's long northern pipe there.
Is that helped by some of the recent changes, by the way, to nullification? Has that?
No.
Okay, those changes were a little too
balanced.
Why
would that change anything?
Well, it's just gate camping pipes, preventing people from coming into your space, that kind of thing.
I think the biggest pain in the ass I've seen with the whole nullification changes is the ability to undock a nullified industrial, warp it to 0 of a fax, and just continually do that and drop off capsticks. That is a terrifying prospect, and I do not wish to fight that. I am concerned about what's happening with Fireco, with Deepwater pushing into, well, former legacy space. Are they cut off in any way, or will they be able to sustain it themselves?
I'm sure Fire can sustain themselves. I mean, the worst case is they're going to trade their old space to move closer to legacy, right? So,
I understand that Deepwater's push into Esoteria and such were essentially shut down by the presence of Mangoes and their strength in their time zone.
It was a little bit that, but it was also just that they were close enough to Delve and the jump bridge infrastructure was still available that we could push Test and other groups there to support. I don't know if you remember, but there was a medium-sized battle between Test and AOM versus Deepwater Dread Bomb where they got pretty roughly kind of hazed and lost a lot of Lokis and some caps and stuff. And after that, their Esoteria momentum really kind of shunted down pretty hard as, the realization that, okay, we're only like 6 jumps from T5Z via jump bridge. We got to be really, really careful here versus kind of the sloppiness they had gotten away with in much of Impasse and Tenerifis, etc.
All right, so finally, let's hit the initiative. They have just released like a State of the Alliance or just kind of a talk about their campaign ending. They were over in the drones area. Did anybody hear that, Soda, or read about it? Or okay, the characterizations were they did what they wanted to do. They went out and created their efforts helped create part of the stalemate that you're seeing in 1DQ. But now that Pappy is kind of relaxing, they don't want to stay vigilant because they want to relax too. So they're coming back to Delve to hang out and chill out for a while. Apparently that's what they're going to do. And I think there's a corporation from Bastion moving over to the initiative. But they see what they did as a success. Surprise, surprise. What do you think, Vily?
They consider their drones campaign a success?
Yeah, they said they did what they needed to do. They took your attention off the ball in Delve.
Sure. Like, at a certain point, people say stuff and it's so insanely propaganda-y that like it just like loses all comprehension with reality. Like, yeah, they went to the drones and PanFam formed a couple times to stop them, primarily in European time zone when there was basically nothing going on in Delve anyways. And at the same time, Goons didn't lose the 1DQ constellation, so they can, on paper, take credit for that. But like, let's be real here. Like, they went to drones to try to re-achieve what they had accomplished in Impasse and Tenerifis, and they got shut down in one of the most abusive and blatant smackdowns I have seen in a while, where they went from staging Fortizar to staging Fortizar, watch every place they staged get destroyed until they had to stage out of an NPC station, drop some Asbels, lost all of those, and like their one, successful fight they had was against like a random fraternity TFI fleet that didn't have webs, and then they got their big fight win, and they in Vale that was completely unrelated to anything, and then they got to call it a victory.
Wait a minute. So addressing that, it's the whole initiative thing was more addressed to Pappy rather than you, since you don't technically own the drone lands.
Sure.
Well, you don't own it at all.
Correct.
And they were fighting Brothers of Tango and other Horde and Winter, PanFam and Winter Coalition groups rather than, well, Legacy as a whole.
Correct.
Did you lose any sleep over it?
No.
So Orion,
is your statement that because it's not my space that I didn't know what was going on, or
no? It's because it's not your space. It's I don't know. I just.
Well, he's part of Pappy. It was Pappy's fight.
I can assure you,
so.
PanFam was as wholly unconcerned about it as I'm describing here. Like,
you're right.
We can tell.
You are right, Vily, because I did notice they didn't win against Brothers of Tangra, and I had serious concerns for the campaign at that stage.
Brothers of Tangra being a renter group to Pandemic Legion and NC Dot.
I mean, one of the biggest people to give props to in the whole campaign, if we're going to talk about the more nitty-gritty details about it, was Slice. Slice on their own was almost outforming Initiative in many situations, and was literally like handing them the smackdown on their own with, maybe, some Brothers of Tangra support, right? There's some, mega props to be thrown their way, I think, if anybody deserves kind of a special shout out in terms of achieving stuff in the campaign.
Slice was the intended target. And,
were they? I wasn't even tracking that.
I think they were, yeah. They were supposed to be disrupted by this. And I don't know what happened, but I like Slice. They've been around and pretty consistent for a long time.
Is Riot Rick still associated with Slice?
I don't think so.
That's the last sort of cultural touch point I have with them.
No, that was a while ago. You're out of Slice touch. You're out of Slice touch.
Riot Rick is still in Slice, by the way.
No, is he active?
Yes, he is.
Oh my god, I apologize.
He's still running around with that. He's still running around and commanding with that blasted rapier. He's indeed.
I think I still get his like cloaky bastard emails. Like he has an email list where they have NPSI Plops fleets and sends out lists of all of their kills.
Oh, listen, I apologize, Artemis. You were right.
I
mean, I didn't know. That's why I asked.
Yeah.
As for Initiative, I am curious to what they're currently doing. I watched a video by Thanak. We've done a previous interview with him. He runs a small independent is in this awkward state because he's getting assistance from Winterco and moving, but he runs a small independent Sovnol alliance, formerly in Pure Blind, now moving to Gemnet. Now, on their move to Gemnet, they're having a bit of a struggle and growing pains, fighting other really strong opponents. They're fighting with Volta, who decided to get involved. They're fighting with Darkside and Tissue, psychotic tendencies. But now they also have encountered Initiative up in Gemnet, who they also have to fight
Initiative
them.
and Volta aren't involved whatsoever. Like, Volta got called for a bat phone because they bat phoned Winterco for a fight. So we came in and killed a Fraternity Union fleet, and INIT are not involved strategically whatsoever. It was just a Pando Gila fleet that fought them.
I see.
It was just a Pando healer wormhole fleet.
The thing with I'm not too keen. If I were to make a bet on Womp or Initiative, my money's on Initiative, but that's not going to be a long-term thing.
Initiative aren't fighting Womp. It was just Pando coming out of a wormhole and fighting them once.
Yeah, so it's
mostly Tissue and Darkside that they're fighting. Although they had a pretty bad fight, I think, yesterday against Tissue and Darkside, where they fed a bunch of Munins. So I think now they're working a lot more closely with Winterco.
All right. Well, again, we'll finish up the initiative section, which, again, I think we characterized their, based on what they put out to their membership. They feel like they had some kind of a success and they're back and relaxing in Delve. And if they need to, they'll deploy again, something along those lines. I think you heard Vily's counter, which was, I think, rather factual, and some of the stuff, I guess the beating they took, trying to put down Asbels. How many, did they use Asbels or Fortizars? They used Fortizars.
They had 2 Fortizars in Great Wildlands, I believe, and then they swapped to using Asbels once they were staging out of the Forge low sec.
Yeah. I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at initiative, and I'm saying, I know you guys are tough. NC used to take you on all the time and win. But they really just got slapped back to Delve, it looks like to me.
I don't think that
somebody
matters,
counter
though.
that. Like what's the opposite?
It doesn't matter.
I mean,
at all.
there isn't really any like.
It just wasn't any stakes
anymore. Like Initiative were doing very, very well when like Pappy were busy in Delve, and they couldn't really spare too many fleets to come and save some of the smaller alliances that were pretty far away. So once they got a few Answer Blaxes killed, the iHubs killed, so they couldn't replace the Answer Blaxes, they were able to just wreak havoc in the back lines while Pappy were busy. But Pappy aren't really busy anymore because of the state of the war. So there isn't any like big timers that Pappy can't show up for, right? So like there's not really any like strategic objectives that they can take where PanFam isn't going to be able to not just like take 300 people there for a wormhole and Baphomet Fraternity as well, right?
I don't think it matters one bit whether the initiative actually wins or not, as long as their members keep showing up to fleets.
Right.
Like, rewind the clock a bit before Initiative made this deployment, and everyone, even on the talk shows, was calling for Initiative to be deployed to do what they do best. And one of the arguments that was given was that it doesn't matter if the initiative is successful or not, because if they go to wherever they're deployed to, and Pappy has to send fleets up there to help, then the initiative says they won because they distracted Pappy, which is what they're doing now. If Pappy doesn't send fleets and the initiative actually kills things and succeeds, then the initiative says they won. No matter what happens, if initiative deploys, as long as they don't fail Cascade, they win.
They're going to say
I really
won.
don't think it matters.
Yeah.
I think in this particular case, Pappy can be happy that they successfully defended their space. Slice in particular sounds like can be very proud of the way that they performed. But I don't really genuinely think it matters at all how well the initiative did or didn't do. They're going to say they win no matter what.
Well, I'm thinking you look at Legacy Space as something of an actual victory where you could tell there was some pain. You could tell, Brave leakage was, hey, this really sucks. We're in between moving and we're losing our space over here. And it was just turmoil. And even though Vily, I think you were like, everything's fine, you could tell it wasn't fine. There was some damage being done, and I think you would admit that now. But I just don't see that happening in this last campaign, whether they declare victory, the initiative declares victory about it or not. It just looks like they hit a wall and they're back to where they were. And that's okay, but constantly telling your guys you're winning, you're beautiful, everybody loves you is not a way to lead a fleet. I mean, an alliance all the time. And a lot of leadership, not just initiative, but is doing that. Like, get real with your comments. Okay.
I think it depends on who your members are, because it's certainly working.
I mean, the initiative are doing pretty
certainly
well,
is, isn't it?
They're doing well content-wise, they're doing well numbers-wise. Their impact on the war is... and lifting the siege is... it's hard to assess. It would be the politically correct term.
I just, look, this is a call to all leaders in wartime to, like, level... For God's sake, stop pampering your guys, level with them. and tell them the truth.
I don't know. No one's gonna say, "Yo, we sucked this week."
I've seen it before. Like, tell me that's never happened.
I'm pretty sure I've definitely done that a couple times.
Well, after M2, there's not much else you could say because it was like, that was one time though. But
M2 either.
No.
Like, at multiple points, we were losing SOTOs and stuff in the esoteric area and Impasse and Tenerifis, and it's like there's no way for it, to get around the reality of the situation. If situation's grim, you got to be honest, otherwise people won't.
You'll lose credibility. Yeah.
On paper, you lose credibility. Yeah. I mean, it's
Pando has done the same in the past with their deployments and with their fleets, but I think that in this particular case, it's too important an objective to lose to make that decision.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I don't know if he's the one that gave this speech and stuff, but hey, no leadership level with your guys. So then when we tell the news, we don't have to sift through all the fake talk. Anyway, let's go ahead, Nick. Throw your shot in there.
All right, I'll keep it as brief as I can. Bottom line, when I was living in Fade in CO2, initiative was coming up through the E9K as the initial harassment. If you think these guys are pushovers, you're stupid. They are good. They're real good in the small group. Now, granted, they had Big Daddy Goon following behind them, but every fight against initiative was a no joke. Yeah, they may have bit off more than they can chew here or there, and I think we've all done that. These are some good folk, man. Don't count them out.
Sure. They're good folk. Remember fighting them in NC Dot. I like them, actually, but I'm not going to worship them, as Spartans. There are very few groups I'm going to do that for. Okay, so let's move on to the last part. Vily, if you want to stick around, if not, it's great. But we're going to look at CSM predictions with Ren. We did this on Thursday, and I mistakenly thought for some reason that Friday was going to be when the announcements came out. So it's actually tomorrow. We do not know who won CSM. We have 3 candidates here now with Vily and Sutonia and Rich. And Ren, why don't you show us what you put together the other day? Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm back. How are we all going?
All right, let's do this quickly. No interruptions, guys, so we can get through it fast.
I suspect most of the stuff I've got here is something Vily already knows pretty well.
Certainly possible.
Has done the same sort of calculations to work it out. Our conclusion is Merkel-Chen in nominate, Brisk, Gobbins, Vily, yourself, and Kenneth are going to get in pretty easily. Progod is more than likely, probably 95% to get in. Mike Azarata seems almost as likely to get in, and the last 2 spots are a bit more interesting. I'm guessing Sutonia is probably one of the leading candidates to pinch one of them. Phantomite's pretty good chance of doing it. Ibeast has got a chance. We can throw a bone to Rich saying he's got a potential chance, but...
Don't torture me, man. Don't torture me.
Dr. Spod has been endlessly shilling, and that always helps people. But yes, if you want to have a look at it, we did it on Thursday. We basically went through last year's votes. We assigned those votes to where those potential blocks would vote for this year, work out where it'll go, all that sort of stuff. We discussed how the voting system worked and a few of the interesting parts of what happened last year in terms of especially Kenneth and how he got in. And hopefully the same sort of thing happens this year where someone gets a bit more interesting path than he's just straight in.
Well, there was also we broke down a statement that you made, Vily. Anybody past the 6th place ballot vote, it stopped. You said it doesn't count or doesn't really count anymore. But
that's happy ballot. It's important to understand.
Oh,
that's our ballots are filled with people that are going to make it in all likelihood, right? Every one of those ballots has either Gobbins or Kenneth or myself, right? Which means that invariably the ballot pass is not going to go deeper than 3 people. Which means anything past the 6th has almost no value, really.
Well, it gives me a lot of hope being number 2.
Oh yeah,
Before we get too far into
Yeah.
the math here, should we explain a little bit for the uninitiated how CSM voting works and why it's important to the ranking?
Oh Jesus! If you're gonna try and explain STV on a stream, I wish you all the best of luck.
Yeah, I did it really quickly.
Let me give you the short version.
All
So
right.
basically, right, you rank the people that you want, and there's a bunch of details on what happens if the person who you ranked higher is in or is out, and there's rounds of voting. But basically, the higher the person is on your ballot, the more valuable it is that they're there, and the lower ones are less valuable because your vote is more likely to be used for the people at the higher end of your ballot than it is to be used for the people at the lower end of your ballot.
Yeah, so
everybody happy with that?
If you put a candidate for first place and you put a candidate for second place, let's just call them A and B. Like if A gets eliminated, then your vote completely transfers over to B. But if A gets elected and there's let's say he needed 2,000 votes to get in, but there was 2,500 votes, you would still have, you know, like 1/5 of your vote travel over to like the B candidate. So that way, you know, voting for more than putting like the full 10 slots on the ballot is very important.
Yeah, so we talked about this and we've gone over it at many shows, and many other places have gone over it as well. Vily says nothing really counts past 6th place. Ren says, not so fast. There was a lot of
happy
votes.
Ballot was my contention. Not like there's some ballots where the 10th place person will get the majority of votes on those tickets.
Mm-hmm.
But on the Pappy ticket, that is not true in any regard, right?
I would disagree highly there. There's one last year with Imperium that if they'd have changed their 9th candidate, someone else would have got in, and they definitely had more than 3 candidates get in.
How so?
Because if you look at the last run, their 9th candidate was Torval. If they had to put Loresso Cross down as their 9th, Loresso Cross would have got in.
Well, in any case,
the Imperium ticket.
Yes.
Yeah, which is
the difference in those votes would have been
about 170 went to Torval. So if you take those 170 and put them onto Loresso Cross, that would have been 340 change. Loresso Cross didn't make it in by under 150, so he would have made it in.
So you're saying somehow the 9th place spot on the Imperium ticket, after 3 people on the ticket in front of him have been
5 got in. Because the Imperium ticket last year was Merkel Chen, Brisk, and Nominate, and then had Vily, Gobbins, so you had 5 different people in at that point, and the 9th person made a difference.
Vily, you were on the Imperium ticket.
Yeah, I think that was correct. I would suggest you double check your math, honestly.
I very much know my math. Would you like to have a look at it?
Sure.
He's a structural engineer, so I think he's... Oh, that's doxing, isn't it? Sorry. So he does pretty well on math.
Just because you're good at math with one thing doesn't mean that...
Would you like to look at the stream?
Sure.
So you can see 170 on the last round to Torval from a nominate. That's from the Imperium ticket. You can see another 70 there to Loresso Cross from Maria Taylor. So that is frat voting. And then you see down here, Loresso Cross on 2,306, Phantomite on 2,450, so there's 150 difference there. That 170 on Torval, if they had gone to Loresso, you would have got 170 more and it finished above Phantomite. And I believe actually Torval would have missed out because Torval would have been minus 170. So it would have been Loresso, Phantomite, then Torval, and Torval would have gone home. And Torval...
Can you scroll up?
How high would you like to go?
The start of the ticket?
Oh, we're going to go through the whole thing? Oh my God.
Well, no, just to the start of the Imperium. Okay,
so you go with Merkel Chen.
Can you make your font bigger, by the way? Sorry, I don't know if it's
easy. The nominate gets elected. Nominate gets elected there.
Okay, you're going to have to send me the Word document, because...
Then you go here, excess 230. 170
Listen, I'm not going to deny I can be wrong here, but this doesn't make sense with my understanding of how the STV system works. If there's 5 people in front of you,
well, this is
all being elected.
This is a small point of something that you said. Nothing matters past 6th. You guys gave 6. The colluding part of Pappy was you guys gave 6 names, and you didn't bother with the other 4. Was the idea that you could put whoever you want after those 6? And do you think that's a good strategy?
I mean, that's fine. It doesn't bother us at all. Like, the amount of value past those is very low.
Well, we'll know tomorrow, like how many votes fall off, and we'll be able to look back on this and say, yeah, it was a good or bad idea. We'll have actually some evidence. But
would you like another example?
No,
I would like to see the actual document.
A really good one.
No. You guys can take it offline and we'll discuss it.
Wait. Just one.
It's got to be quick.
PMFM had 10 people on their candidate. They lost over 400 votes by the end of their candidate ticket because they didn't have an 11th person.
There's no.
11. Is that enough to?
I think you're looking at the data wrong. I'll be honest.
I would be very surprised if I am.
Sure. Once again, show me the data and I can look at it.
We'll look at it after the show.
If it tilts the election and gets a candidate on, it should mean that every vote counts.
All right.
No?
Well, listen, we're going to know the answers to all this. Rich, Suetonia, Vily, I think you're probably in a comfortable spot. So we'll know tomorrow at about 1800 or about 1800. Look at CCP TV. And Vily, since you're here,
are they doing another stream?
Yes, they're going to do a stream live, and you're going to be able to watch the results live.
Yeah, I hope CCP Aurora's made another PowerPoint presentation that took her like another 100 hours to make again.
So, I think CCP Swift has been giving out information on the stuff. So I don't know if he's going to be involved in the actual presentation. So it may be a slideshow. It may actually... I think they have something up their sleeve because they've given out some hints. So I imagine it's a process. So it'll be really neat to see. I cannot leave, though. We have Vily here, CCP TV. We were just talking about them. CSM interviews. You got brigaded, Vily. Pretty ugly stuff. I got in a lot of trouble for talking about it. We had some people quit TIS. Very public. But it is definitely a thing that happened. Can you tell us what happened and if you were bothered by it or not?
I mean, honestly, there was other stuff going on that day that bothered me more. The generalized harassment by the Imperium is something that, as anybody involved in this war is seen. You have to have at least some level of a thick skin, I guess you could say, or be used to. But to me, it was par for the course. It got ugly when they pinged the stream, and immediately you had people invading Phantomite's interview, which was going on at the time, and just distracting and taking away from that. But to me, that was just par for the course. Another day.
Did this? So after the Phantomite bled onto your stream, did that affect anything on your end?
Watch Twitch chat when I'm doing any show. It's a bad recipe to get yourself very distracted.
Well, perhaps it didn't affect you, but what about the people who were running the show?
Well, I know the people that were involved in terms of CCP were not super thrilled about it, but
Oh, did they say something?
Maybe.
Are you allowed to say what they said?
If CCP said something, that's CCP.
All right.
I'm very careful with what I say about what CCP may have said, kind of thing. But regardless, it happened. Shitty. It's dumb. It's whatever you want to call it. But that's just par for the course.
Well, it's more than that. You have to be careful what you even say nowadays, right? Because everybody's got eyes on everything you say or anything you do.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, obviously you've got to be just as politically correct in any kind of an environment like this as you would normally be. But there's definitely I don't know, actually, because the reality is no matter what I say, people are going to twist and straw man and try to create a confluence of words that is not actually what you intended to say. So I feel it almost loses some of the point when you try to, say things properly, and yet people will still find ways to say, you said something wrong, right? So it creates an environment where it doesn't really matter what I say; they're going to find something, way to twist it anyways.
I
Do you feel like it's even valuable, or like that should even, from my perspective, and I'm very much asking for yours, they're not going to sway any opinions. Like, the people who are supporting you have the reasons for supporting you. The people who don't like you already have reasons to don't like you. Or any sort of twisting of your words, is that going to change anybody's mind about whether they vote for you or not?
Yeah, I think it might, like, even reading Reddit, you would believe that I wanted to literally, like, out of game commit hate crimes against these people if you read Reddit, right? And even if it's obviously not true, there's still that subsect of people who only really read Reddit or get their news from Reddit, and whether they're positive. Let's just say this: if they're already in my camp, then it's not going to affect them probably. If they're against me, it's not going to affect them. But there's a lot of people in the middle in this game. There's thousands and thousands of people in the middle who only read a little bit of here and there, or that kind of stuff. And it would not surprise me at all if some of them believed I actually wanted to make every goon quit the game, or any of the other insane or crazy things they say about me.
Right on. Fair enough.
I feel I hate that feeling. That, to me, that feels like being just choked, not being able to express yourself freely, constantly having to, well, put up a different person rather than what's, I guess, true and honest.
That's what it is. I mean, I just take it for what it is. Got some people, they're very mad at me. There's nothing I can do to fix that. They're not going to stop being mad at me. I'm their boogeyman. Just take it for what it is.
Well, yeah, because they didn't come after. Hold on, they didn't come after Ron. They didn't.
It's not. Well, not in the same way.
In the same way,
Ron gets it pretty much daily, anyways.
Yeah, it's true. They didn't go after PGL. They did go after you. It seemed like it was.
I'm pretty sure they go after PGL as well. I've seen a lot of.
Oh, definitely, yes. But in this case, where they decided to say, "Hey, everybody, let's go and ruin his interview," which they tried to do for you. And it didn't seem to, I mean, it's not going to not get you elected, clearly, but it seemed to knock Brisk off Pappy's ballots if there was any hope of Brisk getting on some of those miscellaneous votes, like none of that stuff was happening. But the Imperium wasn't really interested in that anyway. They were saying, we're only going to vote for our own guys because we have a bunch of guys. Right?
Yep. I mean, there's... How do I put this? There is no doubt in my mind that... say again, sorry?
Brisk is the one that lost out because any goodwill he might have gotten from Pappy's side for being a nullsec kind of rep, that went away.
Well, Brisk wasn't going to get on our ticket either way.
It wasn't? Okay. So that didn't matter.
Help my memory, is that a departure from previous years? Did it not used to be that previously nullsec would round out their ballots with leaders from other coalitions just because you wanted more people supporting your playstyle?
Yeah, that happened last year, right? Because Goons even had, I think, Vily as like slot number 6 on their ballot,
and Gobbins too. We just heard.
We had ProGuard.
Sorry, but Frat, Horde, and Test did not have any Goons or Initiative on their ballot.
Last year
or this year?
Last year.
Yeah, it was kind of a null first era, right? Null first after blackout, that kind of a thing. So they were in the same, like, hey, let's help each other out. Let's dominate together. Let's make sure that CCP is addressing null issues. That seems to make sense. Then you have a war. It's pretty ugly. Gets pretty bitter. And they're like, yeah, we're not helping you guys out, even though we're in the same play style. But I was wondering if that raid had affected you in any way.
not in really, like, as I say, it's just par for the course.
You've had 8 months of it, right? And this is the thing that bothered me, and then we'll end on after this. But I don't think you can prime a crowd for 8 months with some visceral stuff coming your way, coming PGL's way, mostly, right? They even designate like, oh, we're done with NCPL as our enemies. We actually like those guys. They're strong. Look at what they're doing. But Vily,
Well,
for 8
then
months.
Will say something they don't like, and all of a sudden,
yeah,
back at him.
Right, and they call him some names too. But the point is, there's this new target. So you're amping up your guys over a period of time to really high levels of anger. And then you say, let's go and listen to him talk and basically make fun of him, which was explicitly said. And they give the link. And so you ping that to all your guys. There's an expected result, right? Expected result, right?
If you wind people up and then let them go,
yeah, I don't
places you are at least somewhat responsible.
Right. So what happened was just not unforeseeable. That was exactly the result that they wanted. And then they go back to a program and talk about it in congratulatory ways. And so that was a confirmation that what they had the intended effect. I just think that was probably pretty close to crossing some lines that they shouldn't have crossed.
Well, when you toe the line, sooner or later you'll come up to it.
But it seemed like you were concerned about something else, not really that. And so now as the CSM election cycle closes, I guess we'll find out how Pappy and the Imperium measure up against each other, and then see what those extra slots, what they went to. Maybe Suetonia, maybe a Rich, maybe Mike or Azaria. I guess we'll find out.
I'm looking forward to it, Matterall. As for the whole null first mentality, in the previous years, ProGod was actually being quoted as stating, directly quoted, definitely not, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure all 10 candidates are nullsec FCs or people who listen to nullsec FCs. So it was definitely a very, very pro-null in the previous...
ProGod lost my vote a long time ago, but that just is icing on the cake, But yeah, definitely they were colluding to put nullsec in the spots, and it's happened again this year, but not with each other. They've colluded on two sides.
I'm looking forward to see who are the wildcard candidates and the changes to the game. In the next CSM, especially if the war is ever done.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, I'm sorry I had to get up during that section. I have things going on that I have to run off to, and we should end the show here. Thank you very much, Vily, for coming in and giving us some insight on what's going on with the war. You being one of the admirals of the entire super block, I guess it is. We will be doing a lot more news and war coverage for the next few weeks. As we said, we're going to refocus on the war because as people step away from the game and start playing or start relaxing into a COVID-free summer for them, hopefully, they will probably want to know what's going on in EVE Online, even though they're not fleeting up all the time and checking it out. So we'll be looking at that. Last comments, guys. We'll start with Rich. You have anything else you want to say before we go?
Yes, I believe quite a few people are departing from the game as of current, both for real life and also somebody pinging me and trying to get me on World of Warcraft rather than Eve. Thank you, Beltram.
Suetonia?
Not a whole lot for me to say today. Mm-hmm. I just hoping I get elected on Monday. We'll see, right?
You exhausted from campaigning?
I mean, I never really campaigned that hard, to be honest with you. Like I wasn't going crazy like some people were doing like 3 weeks before the actual like official campaign period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was kidding because to me you campaign like a cat on a windowsill, totally relaxed, visible but relaxed. All right. Nick, do you have any last comments?
No, just best of luck to all the CSM candidates wherever you're from, and if you do a good job, I'll be singing your praises. You screw me, and I'm on you, man.
All right, Artemis.
Yeah, I mean, if you're one of those people who summer's coming around, you're sort of getting burned out on Eve. Maybe you're a nullsec person who's tired of fighting in the war. My recommendation would be look for what else there is to do in Eve. I know I personally have been pretty burned out, too busy in real life to really do what I wanted to do in Noir, and so I left Noir just last week and just have been doing stuff in HiSec for fun. I stuck my main in Brave Collective because it seems fun to leech off of the null empires, and just like the way the HiSec mechanics are now, you're just better off being in some random HiSec corporation and using all of the nullsec assets. So that's what I'm doing. I'd highly recommend it if you're looking to take a break from Eve. Don't think about taking a break from Eve. Think about taking a break from your current playstyle in Eve.
That's great advice. I didn't know you were in Brave. That's awesome. Ren, you have anything else before we go?
Probably not. I think we've had a pretty good show.
Yeah, thanks. And Vily took off, so goodbye to Vily. All right, well,
he's preparing for the argument we're about to have.
Yeah, right. He's preparing his stats. All right, well, go get him. That'll be fun to see. Listen, thanks very much, guys, for showing up. Artemis, really good to see you again. Have fun in Brave. Maybe I'll join you in there. I was looking for a nullsec opportunity. I've gotten some recruiting offers. I appreciate them. I'm sorry I haven't been able to look at them. I've been very busy. Whoops. But it is time to go at Talking End Stations. So we will see you next time on Talking End Stations. Bye-bye for now.